because I know everybody has time to watch that and are passionate about it. But I've been wanting to talk about something that was just foundational to Open Table and to my life in 2019 and before. And so I'm going to do that today. And I really did. I love kids, and all the chatter. I was just making sure you could hear me, not that they had to be quiet, but you can hear me. Okay, cool. So I also wanted to say too, as I talk today, and I was telling Derek, I have a lot I want to say, and I'm going to say all of it. So if you need to leave. If you have questions or some comment about, as we go along, just say so and stop me. This is not like I'm not, it is conversational in that sense, even though I'm going to give you a lot of stuff. Okay. So in 2013, the associate pastor that I worked with was attending an event in Austin, Texas, because lots of church events are in Austin, Texas. But anyway, it was called Verge. And during that event, she learned of a movement that was taking hold in the church. And it had been around for a long time. It was just getting some attention that, made it more visible. So this was taking hold in the church world that opened her imagination to what, to some possibilities. And I want to say right now, because I was going to use a word, I'm trying, again, this is part of the struggle of figuring out new language, and it's part of why this has gone a bit dormant, and I'll talk about that a little later. There's just, I only know old words to use for it. And so, I think of words like, so trigger warnings, discipleship, I know, it's spooky. And, and even mission and missional and church and just all those words. So I'm going to use them at the beginning of what I'm saying often, because they are easiest for me to talk about, and then I want to kind of explain them in some different ways. Okay. So she returned from this conference in Verge in 2013 and shared with me her experience. And I don't remember what she said at the point that I went. I don't mean like I fell on the floor and was, needed lots of tissues, but it was emotional. And I even texted her a couple of days ago and said, "Do you remember what you said to me when I cried?" She didn't remember the exact words. So my response at the time was out of this moment in my life. It was kind of and I'm not sure where this word came from, but perfect storm, because it wasn't perfect, but it did lead to some really cool things. But this moment in my life, some of which I talked about before, no big surprise to most of you, but when at that time I didn't want to keep doing what I had been doing, but didn't know anything else yet. So this was, years before I actually left what I was doing, and then we're all here together. But so Verge was a gathering of Christian churches from across the country, actually around the world, who were embracing what is called, and it's still called this, and at the time they used this language, missional church. And I actually got to go the next year. I went with her back to Verge in Austin and got to experience that. It was really cool. So the missional church models were trying to flip upside down the long-held assumptions about how church is supposed to be. It was offering a counter version to what is what is pretty typical of people's experiences of church and how it was organized and what was expected. So So around the open table even, and when I say institutional church, that's what I'm referring to, that traditional dominant system. And I actually handed out, I had this little handout of some, these are from some missional church resources that I had. So this dominant model is this one on the top. Actually, it's both of those on the left. But you can see you've got this place. You have this place which is defined with a cross at the top, and it's a church building. And all the arrows, the energy, everything, resources and all goes into that place. Okay, so you try to get people to that place. You need lots of things to keep that going. Okay, so is that, you understand what it's trying to say? Yeah, so it's just everything is headed that way. So that is what the missional church is trying to turn upside down. So that's an inward, institutional focused model. The missional church flips that around to look like the right-hand side. So you have a group of people, and they're not particularly defined by any, you see that they're not confined inside anything, it's just a group of people, and all the arrows go outward. So resources and attention go the other direction. And I'm going to say, I hope I don't have this down to say later, I want to say it twice, but it isn't particularly that you do away with one to have the other, but it's a matter of focus, because we do some gathering together, but our focus is not what's on the left. It's more of what's on the right outward. So. All right, so the missional church movement was fueled by the idea that we had spent way too much time sitting in classrooms and sitting in auditoriums and sanctuaries learning about what Jesus taught. We learned about what disciples of Jesus should be about. We were learning about that Jesus taught we should love other people. We learned about all the things that make a difference in the world, that come from the things that Jesus said. And we spent a lot of time worshiping Jesus. So there's energy and resources pulled in to that endeavor. And some people figured out that the mission of the church, the purpose of the church, had become the worshiping and the learning and the discussing. And that was it. I mean, that was the end result. So that coming together to do those things began to kind of feed itself. And it felt good. And you were like talking about how to change the world. This is what we should do, but not doing it necessarily. My own ideas about, I turned 3 pages. I did that once in a sermon, and yes, I use a manuscript, although I try not to just simply read from it, but I did that one time when I was preaching 3 services a Sunday, and the very first one, I turned a page, and there was a page that was gone. And so I'm trying to just talk my way from the end of one to the beginning of the next to get into it, but anyway. So along with that, all of that inward focus was the reality that other people on the outside of that, and a lot of us on the inside of that, weren't really wanting to do those things. It was like, so what? People started calling out the truth that most of the church had stayed still, doing these things and feeling good about it and perpetuating itself, while everyone else, many other people in the world, outside of that, and in the culture, was moving away from that stationary place, building that system that was church. And that people who were interested in attending all of that was shrinking. So this model, remember, was very highly dependent upon getting people, attracting, and a lot of resources in attracting people to come in, and they were like not interested. Less and less people were interested. So the model could no longer be sustained, and at some point isn't going to be able to be. So if that's the case, then what? That was behind the missional movement. And it wasn't only that. I do believe that there was a sense of people reading, stories of Jesus, what he taught, and then saying, we're not doing this. How can we actually do this better? So, it's an idea of stop making this the center and the point of everything else. Instead, we started realizing that God even is not just here, in this place and in this system, in this staid, steady church building. God is, terms from the missional church, God is always on mission. In other words, always out and about, everywhere, at work, present in all things and every person, everyone's life. And so, if that's so, then the points of connection with the divine, with the holy, with God, are multiplied in huge proportions to how many people you can attract to this thing inside this place. So that life of opportunity to connect with what God is doing everywhere is living on mission. And that means that on the way of your life, your everyday, that's how we often refer to it, even I've done that here, on the way of your life, your everyday places, the everyday people that you connect with, the everyday places that you work, where you play, where you live, there is God. Not in the building only, but everywhere. And guess what? All of us are everywhere. We are lots of places every day and every week. If you think about just how many of us are in this room right now, when we leave from here until the next time we get together like this, it's going to be a couple of weeks, we will have, how many people will we have just met, crossed paths with? Where are the places that we'll end up being? Just huge amounts. So to make that shift from one side of that picture I gave you to the other, is an important part of that is to shift our idea of what an encounter with God is, and how we think about that, and how that has been defined, and how that has been told to us, that it is, and what that is. An encounter, with the divine, with God, can happen with a clerk at a store who you ask, how are you today? And
the Burger King mom.
The what?
The Burger King mom.
Yes? Tell me about it. Oh, yes! I'm sorry. That was so Tuesday. Yes, the Burger King mom. Yeah, so and people aren't reading the book, still tell us about it. So people, to catch up.
In the book, Jim Wallace talks about how he saw a mom working at Burger King and her kids were over the corner of the table doing her homework. She would rush into an order and then go check on them and come back, and described how he could see how she had worked this job, probably just making minimum wage, and had to make choices between how to take care of her kids and work at the same time, and eventually she, people in those positions get caught in a rut because on making a living wage, what won't cut it when you have, car and medical bills and housing and cost of housing, affordable housing. So, trying to work on, I guess, supporting the Burger King mom versus the soccer mom, and how that was part of the work was about. And
Yes.
how, of course, Christian nationalists support the soccer mom and not the Burger King mom.
Not the Burger King.
Yeah.
Yes, the Burger King mom, the mom at Burger King with the kids, and that you happen to notice. I'm going to talk about some examples from my own life in a bit. Yes, it could be the clerk at the store, the mother at Burger King. You ask the clerk at the store how he really, how's he feeling? How are you today? And you may be that one moment in the day that clicks something in him, and he says the truth. I've had that happen, and then actually I'm jumping ahead, but then I think of times when someone has told me that, like a Kroger, a clerk at a Kroger line that's working there, and the next time I go in, I look for them and I get in their line and I ask them, tell me, how's your mom doing? It's just it's a human thing. You can call it churchy words, but in that moment, I believe very seriously that there is a window, an opportunity, a connection with a human connection, which is also a divine connection.
Okay.
Okay.
This past weekend, on Hidden Brain,
Okay.
if you want to listen to the podcast,
Yeah.
there's a podcast on this, connecting with other people. And a psychologist from University of Chicago did this experiment sitting on the train, and he said, he was writing a book on how to connect with, making connections with other people. And he was there sitting on the train doing his thing, and thought about, oh my gosh, I'm not even doing what I'm writing about. I need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to listen to that, Hidden Brain this week is on the podcast, Connection 2.0. And it talked about making the effort to talk to that person next to you, or making the effort to seek out somebody who's sitting alone and talk to them, and not just how was your day, but going deeper with them. What are you looking forward to today? Or I saw a guy that was really dressed handsomely and said, oh my gosh, you look fantastic today. You're gonna knock out. What are you gonna do? And making those connections. And then they did a survey where they were at a train station in Chicago handing out this survey and
Handing out Christian tracts. No, I'm teasing.
and a Starbucks gift
Yeah,
card.
the survey.
And said, complete this survey for us and fill it out. And one of them was, and the studies was sort of task oriented. Talk to someone you've not talked to. The other task was do what you would regularly do. And the other task was sit there and get really isolated and not really talk or not respond. So they gathered all the data and found out that the people who interacted with others came away much more happy and fulfilled and more excited. And then they even went on to talk about extroverted people and introverted people.
Yes, I'll name that too.
Even when you're a more introverted person, that one-on-one connection can make such a difference.
Yes, in the ways that's okay for you. Yes, because I know introverts are right now going, oh my gosh, no, there's.
Yeah, no, but it was a great podcast.
Yeah.
And so,
Awesome.
to what we're talking about.
I remember a story from when I was young. We all went to parochial schools, and we had uniforms and everything. Over time, mom had gotten to know one of the checkers at the grocery store and found out that her kids were also going to the same parochial school and stuff, but she was working. My mom didn't have to work. We had 9 kids and we were hard anyway. And when it came time to order new uniforms, my mom gathered up all the ones that didn't fit us and brought them to the grocery store to give to the woman who took every single one of them and was grateful. And that was my mom living her faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the summer of 2013, 2013-14, I actually can't remember, but around that time, the associate pastor and myself invited about 20 people from the congregation that we pastored to join us at my house on a Pentecost Sunday evening, I remember that, for ice cream. And we shared with them this passion that was growing in us about this whole thing, about getting out, what could we do outside of all this huge institutional church that we were leading, and yet there was I knew that my faith, my own personal faith, needed something, or it was not going to last. I didn't know what, but this was really connecting to me. So we began a journey that summer, and by the way, 98% of folks probably signed up to be part of those through the summer. And that summer began a journey that changed my life and saved my faith. Because we actually took that thing further, which I'll share a little bit more too. So we were having conversations about what was to become the Open Table. And when those were happening, I said, because in that story, real quick, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it was Lee Tyson who actually had the idea. It wasn't, I hadn't thought about that yet. I just knew that I was going to gather some people in my living room and we were going to live missionally together. And so Lee's like, we could start a church. And I said, okay, I'm intrigued, but if I'm going to do this, it would be inclusive and it would be missional. Those are like the two things. And in 2019, this concept of missional living was just core to how we understood God and the church and our place in the world when we got started. And that emphasis, as I mentioned, has lessened a bit over the years, especially during and even after COVID. It got more complicated and we were just trying to keep people together and connected. We did do some things about that, but it just became less on our radar. And our experiences after COVID and who we were connecting with began to stretch our understandings, and questions began to surface about God and belief in general. And I think COVID changed so much of that for us, for many people. And then we just struggled with how to now talk about missional living in more accessible language. And my own ideas about what it means to follow Jesus, and part of the missional living commitments are about being available for when people want to have those Jesus talks and conversations. And so my idea of converting people and the work of God and even God in the world has been shifting and expanding. And so the old theology that was inherited from the leaders of even the missional church movement was not connecting even with me as it had. And I was trying to find ways to and still am trying to find new ways to talk about it, but it's beginning to get there for me. Like I'm beginning to think that it's something important that is an aspect of who we are that I'm ready to reinvigorate a bit. Kathy, you looked both startled and excited.
Because I was thinking back to that ice cream night.
Yes, yeah, you were there.
Yeah, and brought into and was excited about this whole idea, but the piece that was hardest for me to transition and learn was that this part was important, this out part,
Yeah.
that's what's going to be the new part, but the mission was not to get these people into this place.
Yes, thank you.
The mission was
Period.
was complete when you were being there.
Just being, yes.
And that was the hardest piece.
Yes, we weren't saying, Hi, clerk at the store, you should come to Mason United Methodist Church, or Faith Community United Methodist Church, or, name another church. Crossroads, whatever church, and, all of that. It was just what, it just was. Like, that was enough. It was enough. Just the connection. And then the rest, Kathy Mailer, you have a great phrase you used to use. The rest was beyond my pay scale. That's right. In other words, it wasn't like our job. It was, we used to say God's or the Holy Spirit. I'd say it's a universe job, or is it anybody's job? It just is enough. So that's where I'm coming. So I hope you can see my own struggle with getting it from what it was to like this new understanding has just been something I've been put, even myself, on the back shelf. And anyway, there's been enough interest that I think I want to really revisit all of that. So 2 weeks ago, we heard that Richard Rohr said that God is another name for everything, and that if you love God, you love what God loves. And that belief influences decisions that we make, like how we live, how we vote, how we use our resources. And another thing Richard Rohr said was that God loves things by becoming them. And he's talking about that concept, the theological concept, really, if you dig into it, called incarnation. And that's this universal connection shows up in flesh. Whatever you want to call God or how you experience God shows up, is present and known in flesh. It's made tangible in the world through everything, and especially through us. One way that is done is in us, in humanity, and through us. And a simpler phrase maybe to understand that is, it's love with skin on. It's what Jesus taught. Love your neighbor, love God, love with skin on. So living on mission is to incarnate the love that is God in you. It doesn't require you to do much more than you're already doing. It doesn't require for you to do a bunch more stuff. You don't have to attend classes to learn the 5 steps of how to do that. Although I did find this resource, which is really pretty cool, and it's 8 ways to easily be missional. I will be sharing it. But I will not be teaching a class on it. So anyway, you have to do one thing. This is maybe the part where it's transformative and learning comes in. And that's just learning not in a class situation, but in just encouragement from others in the community over and over again, is to live your life with intention. Paying attention to these things. Be mindful. Pay attention to what is going on around you. Pay attention to who is in front of you. Some examples from my own life. We talked about store clerks, pay attention to their name and say their name. When the server comes to your table and they say, "Hi, I'm Bobby, and I'm going to take care of you." How many times do you go, "What's her name?" Just, it's like, wouldn't it be cool when you have a question, you actually say, "Hey, Bobby, what about this?" And to me, it's like, that can just change someone's moment or their day, because who knows what has been going on all throughout the day and how many people they've just been frustrated by, and yet here's someone who's actually honoring them enough to recognize who they are, at least by their name. So that's one way. Be kind, just acts of kindness. Pay for someone's order. We had this happen at a Burger King, where Shelley and I were sitting at a Burger King, the one that Lee, Tyson, and I shook hands at to start open table. And we were at the same table, I remember. We were sitting there eating one time for some reason, And this family, I saw them get out of their car, lots of kids, they came in, they ordered, and they were going through coupons and such, and then something was happening. I didn't know what, but it was obvious that they were getting frustrated that they couldn't pay for it. Like something was not going smoothly, and I don't know if they tried their credit card, but there was an exchange back and forth, not bad, but just with the person who's ringing up their order. And I remember, call it what you will, I remember feeling, just go pay for them. And I did. I just walked up and just, I was obedient, oh my God. But I listened and was intentional and paid attention to what I was feeling. And I just walked up and I said, I'm just gonna get this. And I just, before anyone could argue, I stuck my card in the machine. And they were so grateful for that. And again, it was not any big deal, but it was a big deal for them. And I just said, they're like, oh, thank you. And I was like, just, pass it on sometime. So, Shelly and I, speak to your neighbors. Pay attention to your neighbors. I've started already my new neighborhood, a little map, and anyone that I've met, not a lot of them yet, but the ones I've met, I've written down their names and anything else they say about themselves now. And that's something I've done in the last couple of neighborhoods. Pay attention to them. Shelly and I have had in 3 neighborhoods ago, when we lived in Mason, we would have annual, we probably had 4 of these or so, annual cookouts for the neighborhood. And we'd pull the grill to the front in the driveway, and we actually, the first time we went around to every house, there were 46 houses, I think. It was kind of every street was a dead end, so there was an end to it, so you knew where the boundaries were. 46 houses we went around in a couple days and hand-delivered those invitations, which we kind of created on the card. And then the next few years, we just mailed them. You can go on Google Maps, you just hover over the street view or the satellite view, and it will give you the address. So we just did that. And 40 people would come. And these was a neighborhood that they went there when it was first started, many of them, when it was first built. Their kids grew up together, but then their kids were gone and they hadn't talked to each other. And there were old relationships starting to, and people started waving when we passed in our car. And we knew who they were, at least knew their face, and I could get my map out and say, that's fine. And wave back. And they're just these, it's the best experience of living in community in my neighborhood. I'm not talking about this, but in my neighborhood that I'd ever had. Trick or treat, wonderful time to just, again, get hot cider or some hot dogs or something and just connect with people and say hi. We did that in our last neighborhood. That was really fun. Taking cookies to neighbors and just saying, hey, we're just had some extra, thought we'd bring them to you. Invite people over if you can. And I'm going to say again, I know for introverts that, I'm kind of on the cusp of extrovert, introvert. I completely understand that that's hard for some of us. So just be authentic and do what works for you and figure that out. That's okay. It's just a matter of being intentional, because I had to make myself go up and ring that doorbell. But I also found that if I have something to do, it's a little easier, so I can say, I brought you cookies, because rather than carry on small talk, and that's all it was. I didn't stay and go in and ask about their grandkids. Just want to say hi, I brought you cookies, live down the street. I'm Dale. So, all right. So, in fleshing the divine love in the world where you already are, it is not about doing a whole lot more. It's about just on the way of your life, being intentional. And then, by the way, the table talks that are on Monday mornings that come out in an email, that I started those to give everyone connected to the Open Table some tools for this intentional, connected way of life. It came out of how can we encourage people to live missionally, to live connected. And so I don't know if you've ever noticed, now you probably will, but there is usually something about them that says, hey, say hi to someone today and do this, or this week. That's all just trying to, if you're struggling with remembering that, it's just another tool. Another way, and I talked about it did not want to take up a lot of people's energy around committees and boards and agencies of the open table. That's one of the reasons we're also trying to keep it not institutional, but there's another reason too, is I don't want your time and energy. I don't want those things to become the end. To where we feel like, oh, we've done our church. I'm serving God because I'm on the greeter committee. I don't know, sorry, Ian. But,
Am I here early on Sunday morning?
No. So anyway, she used to do that for us. So we did have some teams of people who did some things, but not committees. Because I never wanted that energy to be tied up in those old ways. I never want those old things, the previous things, to be the purpose. And I even get concerned sometimes about how full our open table calendar can get, because I don't want any of us spending our energy on just ourselves, unless the reason for that is often how do we live this thing when we're out there. And so that is a big focus of most of what we try to do. But I do think that getting together is another reason that we don't, it's like, coming together only on Sunday morning. It's like, that's wonderful. And I think that, of course, and I think that, or whenever that would be for us, that is a time I think we remind each other and equip each other and encourage each other to inflesh that love all the rest of the time, because I don't do that all the time. And I'm not always aware of how loving I'm being or how I'm kind. I mean, seriously, I'm human like everybody else, and I need people to help me remember that. I think that the common pattern that we talk about, I'm throwing you a lot at you, I realize. The up in out pattern is a great way to keep this in your mind every day, or at least as often as it happens to be in your mind. Because, and again, we're wrestling with some of that language too, especially the up, which is the God focus, and it's like, well, God's not up, God is right here, God is right here. We haven't figured it out yet. But up, if you want to think about how am I aware of the divine presence right now in me and around me. In is paying attention to my relationships and loving those in for myself, my church community, my family. And then out is outside of that circle. Just people who are beyond my usual intimate circle of friends and family. So, paying attention to how you connect with God, be intentional about your relationships with family, open table and friends, and then connecting with someone outside of that circle, like neighbors or beyond your neighborhood or justice needs, etc. Richard Rohr also said, God only invites and includes. And if we are all connected to God and each other and everything else in the world, then that's how we need to live too. Invite and include. Be open, be intentional, be love. My last time at this church that I pastored, we were moving the entire church structure to be a missional church. Not easy. I preached on it, I taught about it. We had a director of missional living on staff. I say that so I can tell you this story. I remember once a woman's name came to me after missing worship for a certain number of weeks. Back in those days, Lynn actually was the person who would send little notes to people who missed like 3 weeks in a row, I think, and say, hey, we missed you, hope to see you soon. And then the process was that once they got 8 weeks or something, I got their name. That was bad. So I remember getting a woman's name, a person's name came to me after she had missed, and I called her just to check in. Now, I remember, am shifting and have been at it for some years. I'm shifting my thinking and my actions, right? She hasn't quite caught on, even though it's been talked about in the community, in the church. So this was a teachable moment for us both. So I said, hey, hi, I wanted to check in and see how you've been. She immediately, and this still happens to me, so let me say this right now. If I call and say, hey, how have you been? I really am checking on how you are. I'm not saying, why haven't you been to worship? Okay, so, but this is old school, right? Old church stuff. So her immediate response was, oh, I'm so sorry, I haven't made it to church in a while. Notice all about that. It's like, I have not made it to church lately. Here's the other thing she said. I've been working at the nursing home I worked at every Sunday morning. They have scheduled me. I was like, that's wonderful. What a great opportunity to make a difference in so many people's lives. You're being church right there at work. Because we haven't even thought about that on the way of our life. Why would you think that you have to not be in relationship with people to go do the thing with God? Because God's not over here. Yeah, okay, that's not right. God's here, but there too. Sometimes not there, but anyway. Brian McLaren said in Faith After Doubt that stage 3 faith is harmony. Stage 4 faith is harmony. And that is when you realize that it is all about love. And this can be exactly, I want to read a little bit of that, exactly what Brian McLaren talked about in Faith After Doubt. And sorry, I said that twice. I don't have time to get into all of that more, but I'm going to in the future soon. But worth repeating for those who've read the book, and if you haven't, here is what he said, and I will stop with this. I gradually came to see that the love of God, however God was understood or described, was not separate from the other loves of neighbor, self, and creation, but was in fact the love I encountered and experienced in all of these other loves. Love for God and love from God were equally present in the love I gave and in the love I received in my relationships with neighbor, self, and my fellow creations. It was love all the way down, love all the way up, love all the way out, and love all the way in. So, thanks for listening to me today. It's just been on my own heart, stirring around again about the passion I had about that and the importance that it held, and wanting to kind of revisit that with us somewhere. So, anything you want to say or questions?